A new report reveals that more than 80% of consumers are avoiding American products, buying Canadian whenever they can. That survey was done by KPMG, and Tim Webb is a partner of supply chain and procurement. Joined us to talk about this. Tim, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So we've heard this sort of, from our friends and neighbors, oh, I'm going to buy Canadian, that kind of thing. But in your survey, there's like an 80% of the sentiment from consumers who are saying, no, we are buying Canadian. Were you surprised by that number?
Not necessarily surprised by the number. I think in the heat of where we are right now, this is how Canadians are responding. And I think that's going to stick for at least the next couple of weeks. We're going to see what happens on the 4th of March, next week. That might be pushed out into April, but I think we're going to see at least this for the next month or so. But it could taper off a little bit if we see tariffs start to become no longer such a big problem.
If they get pushed back or get pushed back again.
Or if it does get retracted.
They not only want to buy Canadian, they want retailers to make it easier for them to buy Canadian. What does that look like?
So we can say that our retailers are responding already. They're very close to their data. They know what the customers are buying. So we're starting to see shelf space starting to ebb and flow towards Canadian goods as people buy more. So the retailers want to make those products more available to their customers on the shelves. So we definitely are seeing a change in the shape. We're also starting to see more promotions as the local manufacturers recognize customers are out there. Let me promote my brand.
So let me ask whether or not there is a decision to be made as to whether or not to sell American products, because I understand Canadians, some anywhere, are looking for that.
Yeah. This is a very complex situation, though. So, and it does change by category. If you take a look at dairy, the chances are that's typically going to be Canadian when you pick it up with Agripors and the Saputos out there. In fresh, it becomes very difficult to produce because this is product that moves so quickly. You've got to get it out onto the shelf as quickly as it comes in, regardless of where it comes from. So really where a consumer can be more discerning would be in the packaged goods, bottles, boxes, cans. There you can take a look at the label, you can understand where it comes from. But at the end of the day, if we start going after more Canadian goods, we are going to increase demand and we are going to increase price. But the survey also recognises that most of the respondents said they're prepared to pay a higher price to keep local.
So higher price is one thing, obviously, depends on how much the price difference is. But the other thing is, are they willing to wait? If they're ordering online, for example, and they don't want to order something that's from the U.S., our closest neighbor, they might have to wait longer for products to come in. Did the survey look at that at all?
We do have a very want my product today nature in North America. Europe normally is a bit of a next day, maybe 2-day wait, and it's a bit more used to that kind of wait. I think for us here, especially in fresh again, you can't wait. The supply chain is so long, 5 to 8 days to get it here to start. You need to buy and consume what you have on the shelf in front of you. But again, where those items have got a longer shelf life, we can certainly expect to see that.
So Canadians go into the store, they want to buy Canadian, or they're online, they want to buy Canadian. What if they don't find the Canadian equivalent? Do we know sort of whether that opens them up to buying American, or are they so shut down from buying American, they're either not buying the product, I don't know if we know that, or they're switching to something from somewhere else like South America?
Yeah. The data suggests that they would prefer, our consumers would prefer, and they are certainly looking at it. Yes, many have said we should boycott US products. But that, again, is extremely difficult because we just don't have the supply in Canada to serve the entire Canadian market. So we have to import. I think we are going to start seeing food producers and food importers starting to shift their supply, but that's not quick. That's
I was going to ask you, that does not, to strike another contract somewhere else, or even to say to a supplier, ramp it up for us, you can't easily do that.
Our risk team is working right now with clients where they're having issues, where they have shifted suppliers too quickly and now walking into real dangerous situations where they're finding that they are not keeping up to the standards, not just the quality, but also the type of work, child labor offshore. These things need to be taken care of and looked into. So you need to do your due diligence before you shift supplier.
Have you ever seen something like this? Because I don't recall, of course, we've had situations in the past where we support the country, but where we have anti-American sentiment reach a point where Canadian consumers are decisively taking action.
Certainly not in my time in the country, but globally we have certainly seen this in various levels. Anything from, hey, let's boycott or reduce on some products or some locations where they come, and right the way through to some serious xenophobia in some cases.
Okay.
So it does change by country.
And I'm wondering whether the suppliers in America care. I mean, obviously the individual supplier is going to care, their business is going to get hit, but they're such a big economy, sometimes you wonder if they even notice.
I think you can take a look at Canada as an extra state. So you're looking at, and that's a terrible thing to say,
right now, yes.
Things, but in terms of 40 million people, we're about that size of consumers. So I wouldn't want to lose 1/50th of my business. I would notice. So I think there's definitely going to be some concern, and you're going to start seeing those suppliers that already take a European supplier that might be manufacturing in the US and supporting Canada through that, might start importing directly from Europe into Canada rather than going via the US.
Something else that we've been looking at, and we saw this with TFI, with the transportation company out of Quebec, they said, hey, we're not going to move our headquarters to the U.S. Donald Trump's offering all this sort of deregulation, and he wants people to be here. And then they got a lot of pushback from Canadians. So it's just another way people are trying to get their voices heard on this. Is this something that sort of you heard about or have seen or are hearing about? Are there other companies thinking, okay, we might think about moving to the U.S. until they get the pushback?
There's a couple of steps you can take, so a legal entity there and then start working through that. But there's always challenges. As soon as you start domiciling in the US, there's a tax challenge. So this is where you need to spend some time with your tax consultants and understand what the real impact is. We have had clients who, when they've run the numbers, have discovered that they're going to pay more in tax than they would have on the import duties and the tariffs into the US.
Okay, so it's something that people probably, as you say, need to do a bit of a deep dive before they make that decision too lightly. Tim Webb, appreciate you coming in. Thanks very much for sharing